Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Hart, and today I'll be breaking down the Monday Night Football game here between the Lions and Raiders. I'll be talking through some of my favorite plays, some core plays, some value plays, as well as a potential lineup build that you guys can play for tomorrow. So make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Do appreciate all the support. And let's get right into this breakdown. Oh, also before I get into it, just want to say if you do play NBA DraftKings, make sure to check out my video that I put out last night for the slate tonight. But diving into this slate here, just want to take a quick look, a quick recap of my day today. So in the main, I only made one lineup in the main slate. I put it in the Millie Maker, and I went with CJ Stroud going up against one of the worst teams in the league, if not the worst, the Panthers, who let up 31 points per game. They're tied first for the most points per game allowed to other teams in the NFL. And of course, CJ Stroud had his worst game of the season. So that was very frustrating. Burned my money there. But then I made some money back here in the afternoon slate here. As you can see, went with low owned Joe Burrow there. I decided to get a little bit more contrarian by only going with T. Higgins here and not with like Jamar Chase or even Tyler Boyd, and then with the mix in there. So it worked out. Nothing too crazy there. And then I won a few bucks tonight. I made one lineup, just threw it in like a $1 single entry contest and went with Eckler captain. So that paid off well there, but obviously didn't win anything too crazy. But yeah, diving into this slate tonight, let's take a quick look at the odds. 7.5 point spread, 46.5 game total there. So as you can see, that it's a decently um, wide spread in terms of the NFL, 7.5. So I guess there is a little bit of blowout risk, but Jimmy G is back. So hopefully this offense looks a lot better. But in terms of the big pieces of news, so for the Raiders side, as you guys can see, Jimmy G is back. So hopefully the offense should be a little bit more in sync without Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell sucking and throwing the ball and just being terrible. So that makes obviously Jimmy G or makes him viable, makes his offense a little bit better. It makes Devontae Adams more viable and appealing. So really like him there. And then other news here is Daniel Carlson is questionable. Obviously, if he's out, we can go to James McCourt here if you're going to be playing a kicker as the backup kicker there. And then on the Detroit side, probably the biggest news of the slate here is the Amon-Ra St. Brown question mark. They just threw him on the injury or on the injury report today with an illness. So hopefully he's good to go. I need 7 points from him in one of my fantasy leagues to win. So really need him to go there. But obviously that's huge news there because if he is not good to go and does not play, they already have where do you go? They don't even have him listed in the player pool, but Marvin Jones stepped away from the team, um, and so they're pretty thin at the wide receiver position. So then we'd be relying on. Let's just take a quick look at the depth chart here. So as I was saying, Marvin Jones is away from the team. If Amon Ra is out, then it's going to be Josh Reynolds, wide receiver one, Khalif Raymond, Jameson Williams, wide receiver 2 and 3, and then we will get some Antonio Green. So a lot of gross options, but some people will want to get to if there is no Amon-Ra St. Brown, and obviously it'd make the tight end Sam Laporta more viable. So that's big news there. Obviously, David Montgomery's out, so it's going to be the Jameer Gibbs show. So I do want to take a quick look at the snap count just to help us get a better understanding of what's going to happen. So moving over to the Raiders here real fast. As you can see for the running back situation, it's going to be the Josh Jacobs show. I expect him to be around 75 to 80% of the snaps. And then on third down situations, at times they will mix in some Amir Adubla or Zamir White to kind of be the pass catching back. Wide receiver situation, obviously it's Devontae Adams 1 and 2, or excuse me, Devontae and Jacoby Myers is the 1 and 2 options. Hunter Renfro will kind of be the third option, but they have been mixing in some Trey Tucker there as well. They're kind of option 3 and 4 together. And then Carter will get a few snaps. Michael Mayer has finally taken over the tight end situation, as you can see, past 3 weeks. 66% of snaps, 81, and then 71. And Austin Hooper obviously has been going down 56, 34, and 34. So that's nice to see there from Michael Mayer. Very strong value play for this game here tonight. And then on the Detroit Lions side, we can kind of take a quick look at who's going to be filling in for Amon Ra. But for the running back situation, obviously no Montgomery. So last week we saw that there was no Monty, and Jameer Gibbs got 87% of the workload. Now I will say I do believe Craig Reynolds came into that game with an injury, and so he only played 7 snaps, 9% overall. So I expect that number to jump up here. So for this game, and they also were down by like 30 or 40, and Jameer Gibbs is obviously a great receiving back, so they obviously leaned on him heavily there. But yeah, I did want to say, Craig Reynolds will probably see a lot more of a workload in this game than he did last game because, he's fully healthy now. In that last game, he wasn't. Also, they got blown out, so they did need to use Jameer Gibbs in the passing game because Craig Reynolds is more of he can catch the ball. I think he's actually had some decent, receiving games over the past few years for them, but he's more so of just a runner. But I do think the split will kind of get to this week 5 split here, where I kind of expect, Jameer Gibbs to get like 75% of the workload, and then Craig Reynolds kind of be in that 15 to 25% range there as the running back too. So kind of expect that 75-25 split there between Gibbs and Craig Reynolds, and then for the wide receiver situation, obviously if Amon-Ra is good to go, he's going to play every single down. If he's out, then obviously we're going to have to look to Josh Reynolds to be wide receiver 1. Jamison Williams down here, he'll get more snaps. He'll be wide receiver 2, and then Khalif Raymond will be wide receiver 3. And then Antonio Green will be wide receiver 4, who actually saw 44% of the snaps last week. Obviously, because they were down, so they had to use a ton of wide receiver sets. Because usually he's seen about 20%, but that's kind of the big news there is Amon Ra. If he's out, obviously we're going to look to Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, Jamison Williams, and you can definitely look to Antonio Green. Obviously, if Amon Ra's back, it's going to be Amon Ra, Josh Reynolds, and then they'll mix in Khalif Raymond as well as some Jamison Williams there for like wide receiver 3/4. And I do think Antonio Green would drop back down to like this 10% range of snaps. On the tight end situation, it's obviously the Sam Laporta show, but Brock Wright does get some snaps there, as you can see, pretty consistent at like 40 to 55% range for Brock Wright. So he's definitely out there. Not seen a ton of targets, but he's definitely viable and in play. So for this slate overall, there's a lot of different builds you can go with. There's a lot of studs. Like each team has like 3/4 studs you want to get to. So you're gonna have to make some tough decisions. That's kind of what this slate is: tough decisions on who you're going to fade, because there's a lot of things I do like here on this slate. So for the Raiders side here, I think it's going to be the Devontae Adams show with Jimmy G back. I do finally expect him to get probably, I would assume, 12 plus targets here. He's been frustrated with his lack of usage. 4 or 5, then 12 was solid, but still only 7 for 57 yards. And it has been the Jacoby Myers show the past 3 weeks. And I do think it's one of those situations where you see a star wide receiver start to get very pissed off and start complaining, and they're going to force feed him the ball. And with Jimmy G back, it does help Devontae Adams a ton. I mean, obviously, Jacoby Myers has been fantastic and been very, very strong and a very, very good play. But I do think it'll be the Devontae Adams show here in the receiving game tomorrow. So I love him as a captain play. And really, really think he should be a very, very strong and safe flex play there. So if you're not going to play him at captain, I really think you need him in the flex play because I expect a huge game from him here tomorrow. And obviously, if he has a huge game, like a 2 touchdown plus game, it's going to make Jimmy G viable. And at 9,400, I don't love the price tag, but still, he has solid upside. And if Devontae Adams goes off, most likely Jimmy G is going to get enough points to at least be a flex player. So it's one of those situations where I don't want to play Jimmy G, but it looks like I might have to if I do go with Devontae Adams at captain. Um, Moving on down here, I really like Josh Jacobs. He's just seen a ton of opportunities. I know he's only had like one true pop off game there with about 28 fantasy points against the Chargers, but still, I mean, 19 opportunities there rushing the ball. Saw 3 targets as well. Week 1, obviously week 2 against Buffalo, they got blown out, so we can kind of throw that out. But then week 3, 17 rushing attempts, 5 targets. Week 4, 17, 11, 25, 25, 5. Obviously versus Chicago, the whole team and offense looked god awful and terrible, and he still saw 15. So he's seen 20 plus opportunities every single game. And so it's just one of those things. He's going to fall in the end zone. He's going to have some big plays at some point. So I really, really like Josh Jacobs there, 8,400. And I do think he could be a very, very viable captain play. Jacoby Myers might be the guy I fade. He's been super, safe, super, super consistent. But, I really want to get to Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams, as well as, a few players on the on the Detroit Lions side. So Devontae Adams, and I don't make a ton of lineups. I only make like 1 or 2 lineups. So might have to fade Jacoby Myers tomorrow here at that price of 8,200. Obviously, with Carlson, if he's in, if you're going to go with the kicker route, they're always viable. I think it'd be a solid play. If he's out, obviously we can look to James McCourt. If you're still going to go with the kicker route, James McCourt is a pretty solid kicker, pretty good kicker overall. Surprised he's not on an actual team yet, and it's kind of just been floating around in the practice squads. But he'd be a strong play there if you're going to go with the kicker route for the Raiders. Michael Mayer, as we saw with the snap count, he is playing a ton of snaps now. It's his tight end situation to lose, and his targets should go up especially with Jimmy G back. I expect him to be heavily involved in this offense moving forward. So really, really like Michael Mayer there at 3,800. And as of right now, we'll just throw in Devontae as well there. So really like both of them. Obviously, if you're going to be playing both pass catchers, would make sense to play Jimmy G in the flex as well there. So let's get to that in a second here to finish off the build. But in terms of value, not a ton of value. I mean, obviously the defenses are always in play. Jared Goff can turn the ball over. You do have Max Crosby there, who's a very solid rusher. So defenses are always in play, but you really need that like defensive touchdown or to be a super gross and ugly game. Not a lot of points for the defenses to be viable. In terms of value, not a ton of value. It's more so just dart throw range. Like Zamir White, probably will see just a few targets on third downs. Hunter Renfro, obviously he's in the mix, but still not heavily involved in this offense. But in showdown slates, all you really need is one big play or him to catch a touchdown at 1,200 to be viable there and to be in the optimal lineup. So he's always in play, but I don't think there's a need to get to him right now if you're only making like one or two lineups, unless you need some salary relief. And then if you do, I wouldn't mind going to him. Same with Hooper. Obviously, both dart throw plays. Hooper could be red zone threat, not heavily involved, losing the tight end situation to Michael Mayer, but he's still seeing some snaps. And that is really it's Trey Tucker, kind of one of those gadget guys that they'll run a few plays for. So if you want an absolute dart throw play, you could definitely look to him. Hope he gets like a big play here, like he did. Two catches, 57 yards, one for 48 yards. Does get some rushing attempts, so maybe they run like an end around at the red zone. He gets in. Absolute dart throw value play, but he's definitely viable there. And then on the Detroit side, obviously the big news here is Amon Ra if he's in or out, and then Montgomery is obviously out. So really, really like Jameer Gibbs here at 8,600, but we'll get to him in a second. So Amon Ra, if he's in, it's going to be really hard not to get to him. He's been a huge part of this offense. Everything runs through him, averaging about 22 fantasy points per game. So he's a very strong flex play, very, very strong captain play. Jared Goff, I think he's obviously way more viable if there's Amon Ra. If there's no Amon Ra, does make Goff a little bit less appealing, but still, he's had some really, really strong games. Looks really, really good so far this season. So it's one of those things. It's really going to be really hard to fit in all these studs here because you have Devontae, you have Amon Ra, you have Jared Goff, you have um, Jimmy Garoppolo, then you have Gibbs, you have Laporta, and it's just like there's like seven guys that you really want to play, and you feel bad, fading one or two of them because they could easily get there. So, as I said, this slate's going to be all about kind of hard and tough decisions on who you're going to fade, but you're going to have to make them. So, yeah, like Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, absolutely love him here. I've seen this last game is not fluky, but more so they threw the ball way more than they needed to, just because they would like to, just because they were down like 30 points in that first quarter. I think they were down like 30 at halftime. So yeah, they just had to throw the ball pretty much every single down. So that obviously meant a ton of targets there for Jahmyr Gibbs, but still, he should see probably 10 plus opportunities running the ball. Going to see probably 5 plus targets out of the backfield as well. Obviously, huge, huge ceiling there. Very, very talented receiving back. And he saw 87% of snaps. But as I said, I expect that number to go down a little bit, probably around that 75% range. But still, absolutely love the upside there with Jahmyr Gibbs. I think it's a very strong flex play, but also a very, very good captain play. So as of right now, I'm going to throw him in captain just because it helps open up a little bit more in terms of other guys we want to get to. But yeah, love the upside there with Gibbs. And I really like Sam Laporta here. Obviously, if there's no Amon-Ra, I think Laporta becomes kind of the biggest beneficiary in terms of the passing game. And then I would like to get to Khalif Raymond and then Josh Reynolds. Obviously, we can look to them. But if there's Amon-Ra, I still think Sam Laporta is a great option there. 7,400 does feel a little bit pricey, but he's still seeing a solid amount of targets here. Always a red zone threat as well. So I think he's a very, very strong play there in the mid range. Josh Reynolds, obviously, he's more so contrarian. If there's Amon-Ra, obviously, if he's out or Amon-Ra is out, then Josh Reynolds will be kind of the main wide receiver. As we saw in week 5, I think Amon-Ra did not play, and he had 5 targets, caught 4 for 76 and a touchdown there. So he does have solid upside. He still can get big plays even if Amon-Ra is there. So don't mind him there as a contrarian option at 6.2K. Moving on down here, Jameson Williams has just looked god awful, just struggling to catching the ball, a lot of drops, just hasn't been on the same page as Jared Goff. But it's one of those things. He's a big play wide receiver, so if he catches one of those plays, like he dropped a long touchdown here against Baltimore. It's one of those things. Like he has that big playability, so all it takes is one catch, one 50-yard touchdown catch, and boom, he instantly pays off his upside there. So I do think he's a risky captain play, but he's definitely viable. I think I'd rather play him there than the flex spot just because of his huge boomer bust nature. So if you're looking to kind of fit in some more studs, you could definitely go Jameson Williams at the captain spot, just to kind of help open up the lineup a little bit more. Lions D just a little bit too pricey for me. I know the Raiders have been terrible. Lions D has actually been pretty solid, but still, you kind of need a defensive touchdown for it to work out. Badgley's there. If you want to go the kicker out, that's fine. Is it Badgley or is it Patterson? I think it's Patterson. Yeah, it's Patterson. Craig Reynolds, I think he's viable. He'll be the running back 2. Expect him to get about 20-25% of the snaps. So I expect him to be kind of in that like 5 to 10 rush attempt range, maybe a catch or 2. So he's definitely viable there at 3,200. Khalif Raymond, uh, more so contrarian play there. If there's Amon Ra, obviously if Amon Ra is out, I do really like Khalif Raymond there. I do think he could be a sneaky captain play, but he'd also be a very strong flex play at a very, very cheap price tag, 2,800 if there's no Amon Ra. But obviously, if there's Amon Ra, then he's just more so of a contrarian, low owned option there at 2,800. And that's really it. Don't really need to get down to any of these value plays. I will mention, Antonio Green, um, not very involved at all. But once again, if there is no Amon Ra, he will see, increased snap share count, and he could get a few targets, and he's only 200 bucks. So he's down there. And then Brock Wright as well, not really involved in the passing game, but, he could have a few targets. One of those could be him falling in the end zone. So if you're looking for absolute, cheap value, those two could be it for you. And that really does it for the breakdown in terms of finishing off this lineup. As I said, it's all about there's a ton of tough decisions here on who we want to play and who we want to fade. Right now, just because I do want to fit a good amount of studs in this lineup, I do think I don't love it here, but it's super risky as I mentioned. But I do think I'm going to go with where do you go? Jameson Williams as a captain play, just because it does help open up us to get to a few more flex plays that we want to get to. So we'll go with him with Mayer and Devontae Adams. As I said, I absolutely love Jameer Gibbs there, just with no David Montgomery. I do think we want to get to Jared Goff there to pair with Williams in the captain spot. Gibbs there, who does have that passing upside, or excuse me, the receiving upside out of the backfield. 8,600 left over. Obviously, we cannot get to Brown or Jimmy, which is tough. Really want to get to Brown there, but it does lead us with Josh Jacobs there. You can definitely get down to Myers, or you can get to Sam Laporta here, 7,400, which I think is a very strong option. So obviously, you have Jameson Williams there in the captain spot. Very boomer bust, but it does allow us to get to kind of these fit in another very strong option down here. You don't really have to rely on any like $200 value plays here in this lineup, which I think it makes it a strong lineup because you're not relying on a guy who's 200 bucks to get like a couple catches. You kind of have all guys who are very, very strong and viable in this lineup here. Jameson Williams obviously has a huge playability and upside. He's just dropped a few. If he catches one of those and a few more catches, I mean, he could easily be the most optimal captain just with that big playability. Michael Mayer taking over the tight end situation there, excuse me, for the Raiders. He should be heavily involved. I love his price tag there. Expect a huge, huge game here from Devontae Adams. So I'd put him in the captain spot, but it takes out the ability to pay up for like one or two more studs or mid-range guys, and you'd have to go down to one of those value plays, which I don't like. So really like Devontae there in the flex. Jameer Gibbs, I think he's just going to see a heavy workload here, so love his ability there. Jared Goff, since we have Jameson Williams in the captain spot, going to get to Jared Goff here, especially with the receiving ability of Jameer Gibbs and Sam Laporta there. So yeah, I think this is going to be the kind of the final early look build. As always, stay updated with that injury news because obviously the Amon-Ra Brown situation does kind of change the whole slate in terms of who we want to get to. Because if he's out, then obviously we can get to Sam Laporta as a captain play. We're obviously going to want to get to at least Khalif Raymond or Josh Reynolds. So once again, stay updated with that news because this lineup could change by tomorrow. So hit the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next video. Peace.